On the morning of August 6, 1945, a 29-year-old engineer named Tsutomu Yamaguchi was on a business trip in the city of Hiroshima, Japan. By that evening, severely burned and in shock, he boarded a train home. 3 days later, he walked into his office and began describing what he had witnessed to his supervisor. His supervisor laughed at him, insisting that a single bomb couldn't possibly destroy an entire city. At that exact moment, the second atomic bomb in human history detonated above the very city they were standing in, Nagasaki. Tsutomu Yamaguchi had just survived 2 atomic bombings, 3 days apart, and he would go on to live for another 65 years. Yamaguchi worked as a naval engineer for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, designing oil tankers for the company. In early August 1945, he had been sent to Hiroshima on a 3-month work assignment, helping to oversee the construction of a new tanker ship at the company's shipyard located in the city. On the morning of August 6th, his assignment was finally complete, and he was preparing to return home to Nagasaki, where his wife Hisako and their young son were waiting for him. He packed his belongings, said goodbye to his colleagues, and made his way toward Hiroshima's train station to catch a ride home. As he walked through the shipyard toward the station, he realized he had forgotten his travel permit and turned back to retrieve it. It was during this brief, seemingly unimportant detour that he found himself walking across an open field at exactly 8:15 in the morning, looking up at the sound of a single approaching aircraft. He saw a small parachute drop from the lone aircraft high above, followed by what he later described as a blinding flash of light, brighter than anything he had ever witnessed, like a giant magnesium flare igniting the entire sky at once. Without thinking, he instinctively threw himself to the ground and covered his eyes. A massive shockwave swept across the open field moments later, lifting him briefly off the ground and hurling him several meters through the air before he landed hard against the earth. When he opened his eyes again, the world around him had completely changed, the sky darkened by an enormous, rapidly expanding column of smoke and debris. Yamaguchi was located roughly 3 kilometers from ground zero, close enough that the blast ruptured his eardrums, temporarily blinded him with its intensity, and left severe burns across the entire left side of his face, arms, and upper body, where his exposed skin had faced directly toward the explosion. Disoriented and badly injured, he eventually made his way toward the shipyard's air raid shelter, passing through scenes of devastation almost impossible to fully describe. Buildings reduced to rubble, fires erupting everywhere, and countless badly burned survivors wandering through streets that no longer resembled streets at all. Of the roughly 70,000 people estimated to have died in Hiroshima on that single day, Yamaguchi had survived the closest possible encounter with the blast that a human being could endure and still remain alive, protected only by the slight distance and a small rise in the terrain that happened to shield him. Despite his severe injuries, Yamaguchi spent that first night sheltering with 2 colleagues from his company amid the ruins of the city, and the following morning, the 3 men made the difficult decision to attempt the journey home to Nagasaki, traveling first by foot and then by train through a devastated landscape. The train station itself had partially survived, and remarkably, a train was still running. Yamaguchi, badly burned and barely able to see through swollen, blistered eyelids, managed to board it alongside his colleagues, beginning a painful overnight journey home that would take them through the countryside toward Nagasaki, roughly 180 miles to the south. Throughout the journey, he drifted in and out of consciousness, his burns left completely untreated, wrapped only in makeshift bandages torn from whatever cloth could be found. He arrived back in Nagasaki on the morning of August 8th, exhausted, badly injured, but alive, and was immediately admitted to a local hospital for treatment. Despite his injuries and the hospital staff's strong recommendation that he remain bedridden, Yamaguchi insisted on reporting to his company's Nagasaki office on the morning of August 9th. Just 1 day after arriving home, determined to formally report on the devastation he had witnessed in Hiroshima. Bandaged heavily and clearly still in pain, he stood before his supervisor and described in detail the enormous explosion that had leveled an entire city in a single instant. His supervisor reportedly responded with open skepticism, telling him that he must be exaggerating, that no single bomb could possibly destroy a whole city. At precisely that moment, at 11:02 in the morning, a bright flash of light filled the office windows once again. Yamaguchi instinctively dropped to the floor, exactly as he had 3 days earlier in Hiroshima. this time inside his own workplace, in his own hometown. The second atomic bomb in human history had just detonated above Nagasaki, roughly 3 kilometers from the office where Yamaguchi was standing. An almost unbelievable repeat of the exact same nightmare he had survived only 3 days earlier in a completely different city, over 100 miles away. The blast wave shattered the office windows and partially collapsed sections of the building, though Yamaguchi's bandages from his Hiroshima injuries actually provided some protection against flying glass and debris the second time around. Remarkably, he emerged from the building largely uninjured by this particular explosion, though deeply shaken by the impossible coincidence. His wife, Hisako, and infant son, Katsutoshi, were at home at the time, several kilometers from the blast center, and survived as well. Though Hisako would later attribute her own survival partly to a fortunate decision to seek out black rainwater for drinking, which she mistakenly believed at the time was simply unusually dark rainwater. In the span of just 3 days, Yamaguchi had now been present at ground zero, or close to it, for both atomic bombings ever used in warfare. An event so statistically improbable that for decades afterward, many people who heard his story struggled to fully believe it had actually happened to one single person. Officially, Japan surrendered just 6 days later, on August 15, 1945, bringing World War II to its final conclusion. For Yamaguchi, the war's end meant the beginning of an entirely different battle, one that would last for the rest of his long life, recovering from the physical and psychological toll of having witnessed humanity's most destructive weapon used twice, in person, within a single week. For decades after the war, Yamaguchi rarely spoke publicly about his extraordinary experience. Like many survivors, known in Japan as hibakusha, he faced significant social stigma, with some people avoiding marriage or business connections with survivors due to widespread, scientifically unfounded fears about radiation exposure being somehow contagious or hereditary. He continued working for Mitsubishi for many years, eventually becoming a teacher, and largely kept his story private, even from many of his own colleagues and acquaintances, choosing instead to quietly rebuild a normal life despite carrying the physical scars and lasting health effects of his double exposure to radiation. It wasn't until much later in his life, particularly after the death of his son Katsutoshi from cancer in 2005, that Yamaguchi became increasingly outspoken about his story, dedicating his remaining years to nuclear disarmament advocacy and sharing his testimony with international audiences, determined that such weapons should never be used again. In 2009, Japan's government officially and formally recognized Yamaguchi as a double survivor of both atomic bombings, making him the only person ever officially certified by the Japanese government as having survived both the Hiroshima and Nagasaki attacks, though researchers believe a small number of other people may have unofficially shared this same rare distinction. Tsutomu Yamaguchi passed away in January 2010 at the age of 93 from stomach cancer, having lived a long and remarkably full life despite enduring 2 of the most destructive explosions ever unleashed by human beings, both within the same single week of his life. In his later years, he often said that his survival wasn't simply luck, but a responsibility, a reason to speak out so that future generations would understand exactly what nuclear weapons were capable of doing to ordinary people living ordinary lives, caught entirely by circumstances completely beyond their control. His story remains one of the most extraordinary examples of human survival ever documented, a reminder of both the devastating power of nuclear weapons and the remarkable resilience of a single human life caught directly in their path, not once, but twice. If you found this story moving, subscribe, because in next time, we'll learn something interesting.